Hello and welcome everyone to this EIFL webinar about EIFL Digital Research Literacy Training Program outline. And Ugne and I will share some information how we created it. And over to you, Ugne.
Yes, thank you so much, Irina. Hello everyone. Good morning from my side. Lovely to see so many people from so many geographies. I work mainly with public libraries in my daily life at EIFL, but I could see some familiar names, so it's nice to see people I had chance to meet in person. So we will start our webinar, and today we want to introduce to you Digital Research Literacy Training Program outline. And we want to discuss with you how it could be adapted by you and how it could be used in your institutions to train your students and your researchers. As Irina introduced me, I work for Public Library Innovation Program. I'm impact manager there. But my second role at EIFL is content development. And this is why I'm here today, because I helped to put together this outline. As you can see on the slide, I will just start with speaking very briefly how we came up with the idea of creating such resource that we will be presenting today. So it was born with the main goal in mind, which was to encourage academic librarians within EIFL network to organize training in their libraries for researchers and students on various topics that could be put under a broad umbrella of digital research literacy. All started with a need. We were seeing an increasing demand and expectation from public librarians to train the people in the institutions, but we also saw some challenges. In 2018, we did a survey. Survey was for academic librarians who were doing training or were planning to do training for their community. And at that moment, we collected 270 responses from 36 countries. And only 1/3 of people told us that they were currently offering training for students and researchers. Another thing that we noticed was that only 2 areas that were really familiar for respondents were research process, including finding research literature, different sources of information, and writing articles, which includes a little bit of copyright and licensing, Creative Commons licenses, plagiarism, and citation. For all other topics that we included into a survey, actually over 50% of respondents needed further help. So what did we do with the results of the study? We started to think what EIFL can do along these lines, how we could help. And we started looking and bringing together various existing digital research literacy resources that were openly available and could be reused in this scenario. And we started by big input from University College Dublin staff, especially Julia Barrett, who put together a very first draft of this program. And later we added resources from a number of universities and other organizations and institutions. So in your screen, you can already see the document. It is available, obviously, on EIFL's website. Probably we can put also a link to the chat so that the ones who did not download it yet can do it. And this resource is organized according to a research cycle. Next slide, Irina. Thank you. And it covers 5 research cycle stages. So we start with discover, manage research data, then publish, disseminate, increase visibility, and finally measure impact. And just in a second, I will just go through each of these sections and comment a little bit on the content of each of them. So we'll start with a chapter called Discover, and under this broad topic, you can find 5 subtopics. Find your topic and review literature, which is about selecting research topic, narrowing it down to a specific research question, collecting background information, and performing literature review. Next, you can see Google Scholar and Google, which is about performing effective searches using these tools and using advanced search options and limits of these platforms. Next one is other free tools and resources, including specialized repositories for different areas of science, medical sciences, physics, mathematics, computer sciences, humanities, different statistics and data sets such as score-based art and various other tools and resources, for example, to look for images, to look for videos, etc. Next one is manage your references using Mendeley and Zotero, or also subscribe tools, which we briefly review if your institution has access to them. And finally, we have keep up to date with your research topic, which is about creating email alerts and RSS feeds in the area of research that your trainees are interested in, and various online tools, social media, blogs, posts that also can help your researchers to keep up with their topic. Next chapter is called Manage Research Data. As you can see, it only has 2 subtopics, but it is actually a lot of content to cover, especially for the first one. It's called Managing and Sharing Research Data, and it looks at topics such as data organization, documentation, metadata, data storage and backup, legal and ethical requirements, sharing data and reuse, long-time preservation, fair data principles, etc. It's really a big module. And the second one is more practical. And as you can see from the title, it's about writing a data management plan. I know that it's quite new topic for potentially for many of you. And it also gives an overview of some existing tools and templates. Next one. Next we have a chapter called Publish, which covers, first of all, academic integrity, about understanding expectations for sound academic writing, avoiding plagiarism, and appropriate referencing and citation. Another topic is choosing an effective publishing strategy, which is about selecting a book publisher or a journal, and some of the elements of promoting and monitoring of research outputs. And lastly, under this chapter, we have using open access routes to increase research impact, which covers understanding how to publish research work openly, be aware of advantages of open access publishing, finding open access publisher, suitable repository, understanding funders' expectations and policies on open access, etc. Next one, please. Our fourth chapter is called Dissemination and Increasing Visibility. And you will find such topics as, for example, institutional repository, which helps understand benefits of institutional repositories and library services to support researchers, handling different versions of published research, understanding processes and workflows for submitting research outputs to repository manager, etc. Other topic is preprints. This topic explores what the preprints are, helps to find suitable platform for preprints, helps to understand pros and cons of sharing preprints, and how shows how preprints can actually be beneficial to researcher's career. Next, we have researcher identity and ORCID, and where you can find online research profiles and learning how to manage specifically ORCID research identity. And lastly, we have social media and research, which gives an overview of some of most popular social networks and services for researchers, and gives them an understanding how they could present themselves online. Our last chapter is on measuring impact, and it also has 2 topics. So first one is Introduction to Bibliometrics, which is covering use and misuse of bibliometrics, author and article level metrics and tools such as Scopus, Google Scholar, and others, and the ways of choosing appropriate metrics. And the very last one is called Make Your Work Count, which is about recognizing the types of research impact metrics that could be applied in different scenarios to various forms of scholarship, and understanding limits of citation metrics and alt metrics, and developing a strategy of gathering evidence of impact and value of research. So here I just briefly went through all the subjects covered in our outline. It's a long document, and really to understand in details, you have to go through by yourself. But just to add something, I presented content, but now I also want to mention about the structure of the document. So for each of the topics that I just described, you will find the following information. First of all, you will find an introduction, which gives an overview of the topic. You will also find what the learner should gain by the end of the training, or so-called learning outcomes. Then what the trainer should cover, or in other words, training outline. And then we provided a list of resources that could be useful either for workshop facilitator, for you, or for learners themselves. And these resources are actually grouped by type. So for several topics, especially for more difficult ones, we have online courses, which you can take yourself if you feel like you need to improve your own knowledge in this topic, but you can also suggest to your researchers. Then we have more interactive resources, such as online tutorials, interactive tutorials. We have recordings to webinars and thematic videos. We have for all of topics LibGuides. And for most of topics, we also have examples of presentations and training slides, which you can actually adapt for your own training. And lastly, this one depends on the topic. For some, we have all of them. For some, we have only some of them. So these are other types of resources like free tools, examples of practical exercises, tip sheets, articles, books, etc. So variety of other additional resources that could be beneficial for this topic. So I think I'll stop here and hand the microphone back to Irina to continue with some tips, some practical experience of running training, which I hope will give you ideas how you could actually integrate and use this resource as you do training in your institutions.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. And Irina, floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Ugna. As you've seen, this resource is for you librarians who will be training researchers and students. And we thought it's a good idea to have a short discussion how we could actually organize training, especially in this difficult COVID-19 time. And usually when we do training sessions, we start with training needs assessment, and it could be a survey that is disseminated before the training, or some of those questions could be included in the training registration form. So for example, if you want to see what is the skills level of researchers and students whom you'll be training, or even librarians, if you first need to train librarians on those topics, then you could include that question in the registration form, asking like, are you aware of discovery tools? Do you have basic skills on publishing? Are you competent in open access? Are you an expert in research data management? If you do this survey not as a registration form but in advance, then you can ask whether your audiences would like to participate in a training, and what would be their preferred duration of training or preferred way of receiving training. Because now when everyone has strange working times, it might be a useful question to ask. It's also great if this kind of trainings are embedded into existing trainings. So for example, if you already have information literacy trainings for students, for master students or for PhD students, if you could include some of the topics that we outlined earlier in those trainings instead of throwing a new training that might work better. But of course, it depends on your institutional circumstances. Then usually when we train students and researchers in universities, we use traditional approaches like lectures, seminars. We could have some hands-on exercises, but it's usually one or couple people talking and presenting and then doing some exercises together. But you might be a bit more creative and you could organize, for example, meetup events where it's not really a formal training, but it's more an experience sharing event where everyone could participate and contribute, and not just the lecturers. Another interesting format when we talk about training researchers, I think it's always better if researchers hear about practices from their colleagues, from other researchers. So what we like to do when we have our training sessions, we invite researchers to talk about their open access, open science, research data management practices. And we organize small panels where they share these experiences. And we've been thinking that for our forthcoming training sessions, we might switch to this panel format where there is more than one person speaking, because there is this fatigue, especially if we talk about trainings online. There is a fatigue from seeing one person and hearing one person speaking. Then, of course, when we're all back to normal and when we're allowed to have face-to-face events, that's something that we're used to. So that's what we've been doing before. We had either half-day workshops, full-day workshops, or couple-day workshops to cover these topics, because as you've seen, there are really a lot of them and a lot to cover. Then if we're talking about training students, in our European geographies, summer and winter schools are popular, where we're talking about an event which is longer than a couple of days. So usually it's a week dedicated to certain topics. But I guess the main message from this slide, and also from what we've learned in COVID-19 times and with online training, that we should balance lecturing with hands-on exercises. And I think when we're talking about digital research literacy, it's not so much about teaching. Of course, it's possible to include those topics in traditional lectures that you have in universities, but I don't know whether it would be really useful, because we really want students and researchers to practice, and it's really hard to practice if you only listen to the content. So I think this training approach would really work better, where people would have a chance to really interact with the tools presented. And I keep mentioning COVID because that's what I missed the most. I missed the contact with the audience, because now, unfortunately, I can't see your faces. And if it would be a face-to-face meeting, then it would be easier for me to see how you react to what I'm talking about. Like, for example, if I want you to be interactive and you're quiet, then I'll make an effort to do something to encourage you to participate. Or if you're skeptical, then I'll probably realize that there is something wrong with the way I present this material. Or if I see that you don't understand what I'm saying, then I can adjust what I'm talking about to the level needed. Of course, if you are happy, then I'll also see that you are happy. But unfortunately, none of that is really possible in online meetings. Of course, it's possible to some extent if, for example, we would use meeting format instead of a webinar, if all of you would have cameras on, but I would still be sharing my screen and I'll probably see a couple of you, but not everyone. And that human interaction is something that is really missing in online trainings. And that's something to keep in mind if you adapt your traditional face-to-face sessions to online training. Of course, if you need to adapt, because I don't know, maybe in your institutions you still have face-to-face events. And if we talk about adapting, so I guess this duration of training is something that we should keep in mind. And it's really important to include more breaks. Because, for example, if it would be a face-to-face event, we would probably have just one break, one tea or coffee break after an hour and a half or 2 hours. But with online training, it's recommended to have short, maybe between 5 and 15 minutes breaks every hour or every an hour and a half or an hour and 15 minutes. Then it wasn't a problem for us to have a full day workshop before, but I haven't really seen an effective full day workshop online. And my experience is that we shouldn't be scheduling more than 3 hours per day for training sessions, because it's really too much to ask from people to focus on online training for more than 3 hours. But these are just my experiences. So if you have different opinions, please drop them in a chat. It would be interesting to see. Then coming back to this audience topic, usually we start with icebreakers, and that question that we asked, how do you say hello in your language? That's one example of an icebreaker, because then it makes it easier for everyone to understand that it's not this traditional lecturing type of meeting where one person is speaking and everyone is just listening to. It's really an interactivity that we want to have. And presenting right amount of content is another challenge in the virtual format, because again, we can't see whether participants are happy or confused or overloaded, and balancing information with exercises is a big challenge, because I think we've also been to boring meetings, online meetings, where people were just talking and it was hard to follow, but we've also been to other types of meetings where people try to include a lot of interactive content, interactive assignments, and sometimes it was just even difficult to jump from one assignment to another, because you were supposed to answer a poll and then also go somewhere and do something else and write a question if you have any, and things like that. And this finding right balance between sharing information and interacting is a challenge. In my area, open access and open science training, I find it really useful when I focus on tools. So for example, I don't talk about research data management in general, but I talk about different tools that could be used to make data sharing easier on different services. And of course, if these are free services, that works better. And these tools and focus service makes it really practical. And what was important for me to learn is that in online events, you should schedule more time for practice than in face-to-face events, because collaborating, doing something together, doing assignments online takes a bit longer than it would take if we would have a breakout room exercise in a face-to-face meeting. Then, of course, there is a question about finding the right platform. So for example, EIFL uses Zoom. So we use Zoom webinars when we have a lot of participants. Like today, we have almost 300 people. So we're using Zoom webinars because unfortunately, it's not possible for every participant to talk and interact because we are too many. When we have training sessions, we usually use this meeting type platform where everyone could be with video on and mics on, and everyone has equal participation rights. Some organizations use free and open source platform which is called Wonder, and it's a platform for informal interactions. So for example, if you have a week-long course for students, and if you want students to work on some assignments together, then this Wonder platform would be used because it's like a virtual space where you could have a lot of simultaneous meetings with many people. It's not like all of us now are in one room. Over there, you could have, I think, up to 15 breakout rooms where people could interact with whom they want and when they want. And it's more informal than Zoom because this informality of training is something that we're struggling with in this virtual world. And the reason I keep focusing so much on this engagement and making sure that everyone could participate, because unfortunately, I still don't have a recipe how to make sure that every training participant really participates. For example, last week we hosted a week-long course, and we had between 20 and 40 participants, like active participants. But then we had some people who never said a word, never wrote a sentence in a chat. So that's a bit disturbing for a trainer because you don't know whether people are happy or not happy. But then also you're pressed for time and you don't really have possibilities to focus on every participant if you have others who are way ahead and engaged there. So this engagement is an issue. And then if it's a proper training, then usually you give certificates, or if it's a course, you give credits to students. And then there is this question, how do you really assess students' achievements in online training environments? What I've seen organizations are doing, they either have quizzes right in the end of the training or in the end of every day of the training. And sometimes they set up time limit for quizzes, but then it's a little bit unfair because maybe some students have some connectivity difficulties and they won't be able to complete a quiz, not because they don't know, but because they just couldn't stay online. So I've seen other organizations extending this quiz response time up to 3 weeks. So they say, like, thanks for attending this training. Here is a small quiz that we want you to complete. And when you complete it, you receive a certificate of this training. But then how do you really know that it's that student who will receive a certificate actually completes a course? So there's a lot of issues related to trust and cheating. So I guess I'm on the trust side, and I would trust people because I don't think there is a good way to really check that. So these are some of the issues that we're facing. And that's the reason why I have a couple of slides like that, because this game-based learning is something that is becoming also popular in online skills building exercises. And our EIFL colleagues who attended EIFL General Assembly in Bishkek. Remember that we played a game which is called Publishing Trap, and it's really a good way to explain most of the things that we covered in the training outline, but in a game-based approach. But of course, you can't play this game online. It's a game that you have to play with your colleagues, and it's not possible. Another good way to engage students in this case was this example from University of Luxembourg when they launched an open science quest, and they really built it as space exploration quest. So they had it was a self based learning. They provided series of materials, and then they gave assignments to their students. So for example, the question was you want to contact a researcher because she wrote an excellent article and you would like to discuss this with her, but you notice on the article that her affiliation isn't correct, that she wrote it when she was in one university and then she changed jobs, and what would be the best way to check where she works now and what's her current contact email. And that's how you can introduce this ORCID concept, that researchers' IDs are important and could provide useful information. And then there are similar assignments, for example, find a repository where you can find data useful for your research and things like that. But again, that quest was played in library premises. So there were some corners with information and assignments, and playing it online would be a challenge. But some people took this challenge, and in the Netherlands, around Halloween, there is a data horror week, and they raise issues of importance of data preservation and data sharing around this horror stories, what happens if data is lost. And last year they designed this online quest, so they call it Data Horror Escape Room. And I don't know if you ever played with your children these escape rooms where you're locked in a room and you have to perform series of assignments to get out. So that's more or less like that. You're trapped in a room, and you can only get out if you answer the questions. And it took roughly 1 hour to get out of the room, and there was a lot of good feedback from students who played that game, and they used Google site to build it. And that might be an approach. So you can either recommend already existing quest like this, or you can think about building your own. Another example is from so that example was from the Netherlands, and this example is from South Africa, from Stellenbosch University, and they recently launched research data management adventure game, and it's a text-based game that researchers could play to understand better how to deal with different scenarios in research data management. And there are different scenarios for researchers in social science and humanities and for researchers in sciences. So that's another interesting approach where you're building skills, but you're not building them through traditional training, but use this game-based approach. And I hope that a developer of this game from Stellenbosch University will join our webinar about research data management training. And then, of course, after the training, you really want to know whether this training made any difference. And these are some of the sample questions that we use to gather participants' feedback, evaluating how satisfied they are with the event, whether training was their time, whether they like the format, presentations, whether it was catered for their personal learning styles, whether it was engaging. And then, of course, the second set of questions is important for us as trainers, because we really want to know whether we're making any difference with this training, and probably that's something that you can't really ask after the training, or maybe you can ask, like, do you feel that your knowledge and skills have improved after attending this training? But another way of tracking skills development is to try to repeat this question 6 months after the training and see whether people really changed their practices. And then, of course, as usual, things like what were 3 most important things learned. Do you plan to apply those things in your research? And then if you do a follow-up 6 months after, then you can really ask whether you applied. And if you haven't, what stopped you? Perhaps you need more training, or perhaps it wasn't welcomed in your research environment, or there might be some other issues. So once again, EIFL Digital Research Literacy Training Program outline for librarians. It's available. Please download it, reuse it for your trainings for researchers and students. And to make it a little bit easier for you, and also if you want to discuss topic-specific training approaches, we are launching this series of webinars. So they will take place on Wednesdays, same time as today. And we'll start with publish life cycle. So next Wednesday, same time as today, Melissa Shevkusic, who is our open access country coordinator in Serbia, will talk about how she's training researchers and students on academic integrity. Then we'll have Niamh Brennan from Trinity College Dublin, who also attended some of our General Assemblies, and she'll talk in 2 weeks' time about choosing effective publishing strategy. Then again, we'll have Milica talking how she presents institutional repository to researchers and students and how she trains them to use it. Then we'll have David Ball, with whom we worked in Foster Open Science Training Project, and our Ugandan colleagues know him because he spent some time in Uganda as well. So he and Obrat Vučkovac from Serbia will talk about training on using open access routes to increase research impact. Then we'll have a session about ORCID and other research ideas, and we'll have 2 colleagues from ORCID, Gabi and Nabil, who will share latest ORCID news and developments. And then we'll have Milica, who will talk about how she trains researchers on research identifiers and ORCID. Then we'll have 2 sessions on research data management, again with David and Obrat on managing and sharing research data. And for training researchers and students on writing a data management plan, our colleague Eva from Kaunas University of Technology will join David, and she will share how they're training PhD students on writing data management plans. And then in June, we'll have webinars on preprints and social media for research with Anna Dopčević, also from Serbia, and 2 webinars with Niv again on introduction to bibliometrics and making your work count. And again, those webinars, they will introduce a topic a bit, but they will focus on training. How do you train researching students on using social media for increasing research impact or on academic and integrity? So they are sessions for trainers who would like to share experiences and learn from other trainers. And all these webinars require registration. So if you haven't registered yet, please do so. And we'll share slides and there will be a link, and we'll also post a link in a chat. Just really the last slide, and then we'll go back to your questions, because I see that your questions are coming. As you've seen, we covered with support webinars, we covered all research topics except Discover, because we were not really sure whether you need support webinars on how to train researchers on funding research topics and review literature, or on searching Google and Google Scholar, or using free discovery tools to locate freely available copies of theses and dissertations or journal articles or other resources. And short announcements that if you haven't seen EIFL resource, how can I get access to the article I need? There is a link, and I'll also put a link in the chat, and basically outlines different free discovery tools you can use to get access to articles which are published in paywalled journals, but are made available in open repositories. And then we're also not sure whether you need training on reference management, because I think you're training on Zotero, Mendeley, and Node, and others. So that's a question that we have to you, and in order to answer that question, we prepared a short poll, and let me launch it. And I hope it popped up on your screen, so you can see some of the questions that we write. That we wrote for you. So, for example, would you like to have a webinar on finding research topics and reviewing literature? Would you like to have a webinar on searching Google and Google Scholar? Would you like to have a webinar on free discovery tools and resources? Would you like to have a webinar on managing references using free tools such as Mendeley and Zotero, or using subscription tools if your institution has subscriptions such as EndNote or RefWorks? And the last question is, would you like to have a webinar on keeping up to date on research topic? So somehow we hope that maybe you wouldn't need those webinars, because you are already experts in those topics and you are already training researchers. But I see that many of you are answering yes. So I guess that's something that we'll consider after we finish with series of webinars that we shared with you. So let's maybe give a couple more minutes, because I see over 100 people voted, but we have almost 300. So another minute, and then I'll share results with everyone. But looks like there is a need for those webinars as well. And while you are voting, I can post links in a chat that we promised. that's a resource itself, but I guess you already have it because you registered for the webinar and there was a link to it. And I'm putting another link, which is a list of all the webinars, dates, and registration links. Okay, so we have 167 people voted. So let me end the vote. And share results. So I think now you can view the results. So we have mostly yes for all topics. Then we'll be in touch with you when we'll be scheduling those webinars. Thank you so much for taking time to answer. I'll stop sharing, and I see that we have some questions. So let's start with the ones in the chat. So I already shared the link to resource download, and I also shared the link to webinars outline where you can register. And apologies that some of you had connectivity issues. Yes, of course, we're recording this session and we'll put recording on YouTube and we'll share a link with everyone who registered. So that was the first question. I also shared the link to webinars list, and I will also email that link to everyone together with slides and recording. Presentation will also be made available, so you will receive it. Yeah, there is a request to include discovery in training, and I guess that's what we also got out of feedback via poll. So we'll do that, Theodosia. Richard is asking whether we have sample digital research literacy training needs assessment survey. And Bert added that they are developing this training program. I can send you again together with today's materials. I can send you a link to Trinity College Dublin assessment survey. They used it for digital research literacy online course that they are creating. So some questions might be specific to that, but I think it could be a good starting point. And maybe if others have links to similar useful needs assessment service, you can drop them in the chat. We won't be sending via email questions about training because it was just a quick check with you whether you need such trainings or not, and looks like you do need. Yeah, and then Theodosia is asking, can you do a poll on the topics that you're not sure of? I guess that's a bit hard to create a new poll, but that's also another question that we had to you, and you could use the chat for that. If you feel like there are some topics that you need help with, but the topic wasn't mentioned today, do you have any other training needs related to digital research literacy training for researchers and librarians? Please mention that in the chat and we'll see how we can address that.
Irina, we have a question about data analysis topic from David Bukenya. Do you feel like it's already covered under research data management, or that would be a new topic? Data analysis?
Yeah, we had discussions when we were preparing this training outline, because we had some models there about using R and some other tools for data analysis, but then we were not sure whether librarians would be the best people to train about that. So I don't think it's really well covered in that training outline, because it's also discipline specific. But if you feel like that's what your researchers expect from you, if they're asking you to provide this kind of training, we could think how we can support you. But that's also not an area where I have good expertise, for example. So then Richard is asking, what format will the hands-on take when you're organizing digital literacy research training? So for example, if we talk about ORCID, it could be hands-on, could be go and register for an ORCID ID and come back and show your ORCID ID, or use a registry of research data repositories, free data, and find a data set that you would like to reuse in your research, which comes from your country, for example, or from your discipline, or search a repository for research related to your research topic. So exercises like that. And I don't know if others have examples of hands-on exercises. Please drop them in a chat. So unfortunately, we don't have capacity to provide training for librarians, and unfortunately, Nigeria is not EIFL partner country. What we're doing with some of our partner consortia, for example, with League and Ghana, we have a series of webinars that cover some of the topics discussed, and those webinars are open for everyone. So that's something that we could do for our partner consortia as facilitators and as online meeting hosts. But unfortunately, as you see, we're a small team. We don't have many people in EIFL, so we won't be able to engage with specific trainings in specific universities in non-EIFL countries. Sorry about that. Blessings has a question about assisting training needs, and I think we already covered that. Our colleague from China is asking, could you recommend interesting topics about open access? So yeah, I guess what we suggested are traditional topics, usual topics that you cover. So maybe others on the meeting who have interesting ideas. So maybe this space exploration quest that I mentioned, which presents open access in an interesting way, that could be an example. So if you want, I can also include examples of those topics in a follow-up email. Already answered that you'll receive presentations. And I guess that's it.
There were two questions about follow-up webinars. Someone was asking whether they have to register for each webinar, and then also if they will also be recorded and made available afterwards.
Yes, we'll do like we did today. So please make sure that you register, because it's a personal link that you will receive to attend. And those webinars are open to everyone who is training researchers and students. So once again, the link is in a chat. Please make sure that you register. Just
We also have a question whether the certificates will be provided to the people who will attend webinars.
They're not really training webinars, so unfortunately won't be able to provide certificates because they are knowledge sharing webinars where we exchange experiences about trainings. And then Theodosia has a question about can we also have a look at systematic reviews, especially for health librarians? And that's maybe another thing that we need to mention, that our topics and resources are discipline agnostic. So maybe only in some cases they are discipline specific, but of course, when you actually go and do your trainings, they are usually discipline specific. So we'll try to see if we could find health librarians in our group to cover those topics. Thanks, Theodosia. Continue engaging, yes, of course. There is a question, can we continue engaging with you even after the trainings? Yes, please. So you'll receive follow-up email from me, and please get in touch with me if there is anything we can help you with. There is a request to recommend funding organizations because most researchers require assistance with this information. Unfortunately, it's country specific because funding organizations available in my country, for researchers in my country, in Ukraine, are very different from your countries. And that's also a bit out of scope of digital research literacy. I understand that it's important for doing research and also getting funding to publish, but I'm not sure we'll be able to cover that. And yes, please register for each webinar separately. Yeah, plagiarism checkers. I think they will be covered a little bit in academic integrity training, and we can investigate whether we can do anything on authenticate and Turnitin, because that's not something that EIFL provides. EIFL provides Urkund, and that would be easier. And if there is a question whether we want to engage volunteers, of course we want to see if someone would like to get involved in these trainings, please also get in touch with us. There is a question from Augustine about becoming a data librarian. What does it entail? So for that, we have specific activity how libraries in EIFL partner countries could introduce research data management services and how librarians could become data librarians. So I'll promise to follow up on that topic with everyone interested. And I don't see any other questions. So maybe the way in the chat. So if I miss something, I'll respond to you individually.
I think you didn't. I just went through the chat. I think we answered all the questions. Maybe Irina, just mention what people can expect from the upcoming webinars, so that you know that it's kind of two parts of the webinar. One, we want to provide an overview of the topic and to talk about the content, but we also want these webinars to give you some tips of how you could organize your training around this topic. So these two elements we would like to cover in the follow-up webinars, and also specifically look a little bit more in depth into each of these areas.
Thanks a lot, Ognan. And thanks again, everyone, for joining today. And I hope to see you in the coming weeks. So next Wednesday, it's academic integrity discussion, same time as today. And please make sure that you register. Thank you so much. I'll
Thanks,
stop
everyone.
recording.